And judges, please go ahead and introduce yourselves.
All right, good morning. Thank you for being here. My name is Anthony Miller. I am an alumni of the program, so I competed my senior year of high school. And for the last 10 years, I've been working as a coordinator, helping to organize the program and coach students and teachers while preparing for a competition. And this is my first year getting to judge at the national level, so I'm really excited to be here and hear what you have for us today. Thanks so much for being here. Andrew, if you want to introduce yourself.
Hi, my name's Andy Levy. I'm a trial lawyer from Baltimore, Maryland. And I also teach at both of Maryland's two law schools, the University of Maryland and the University of Baltimore.
Hi, good morning. It's morning in Honolulu. My name is Susan Arnett. I'm a criminal defense lawyer, just retired from the public defender's office, and also teach at the University of Hawaii Law School.
Okay.
My name's Nick.
Yeah, go ahead and introduce. Sorry, I was just about to say, go ahead and introduce yourselves and your teacher for us, please.
I'm Nick Sullivan. I'm a senior at Blue Valley Northwest High School, and next year I plan on studying engineering at the University of Kansas.
I missed that. What was the name of your high school?
Blue Valley Northwest.
Blue Valley. Northwest. Great.
Hello, my name is Emma Johnson. I'm a senior at Blue Valley Northwest High School, and I plan to attend the University of Missouri to double major in strategic communications and political science.
And hi, my name is Amita Ganesh. I'm also a senior at Blue Valley Northwest High School, and next year I plan to double major in economics and political science with a public policy focus at George Washington University. We are in Mr. Thomas's We the People class in Overland Park, Kansas.
Wonderful. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to Mr. Thomas. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read the question. I know you've heard this question a million times by now, but we'll read it one more time for the record on the recording, and then you can begin whenever you're ready, okay? Members of Congress are not only legislators, but they are also inquisitorial and should meet frequently to inspect the conduct of the public officers. How effectively do you believe Congress has used its investigatory power? Explain the differences, if any, between Congress's power to investigate and the power of oversight. Which power, in your opinion, is more significant? Lastly, how effectively do you believe Congress has used its oversight powers? You may begin.
Congressional investigatory power, although only implied by the Constitution, is vital in serving as a response mechanism in times of national and political scandals. Although the 19th century did see notable investigative endeavors by Congress, such as hearings and passing the 14th Amendment, the 20th century was truly the era of congressional investigations as the institution became fundamental nationally to upholding justice.
Beginning with the 1920s Teapot Dome scandal, Congress used its power to conduct investigations ranging from the impeachment proceedings and the Watergate scandal to abuse of power and McCarthyism. Even though Congress uses investigatory power effectively in order to maintain the U.S. democratic system and work against corruption, it has been overarchingly ineffective in delivering proper consequences to the case at hand. The Teapot Dome scandal restructured congressional investigative authority, even though it became a standard for legislating.
The Teapot Dome scandal occurred because Albert Falls, the Secretary of Interior during President Warren G. Harding's administration, was convicted of accepting bribes from oil companies to lease reserves to them at low rates and without competitive bidding. As a result of McGrain versus Dougherty, which did not uphold a challenge to conviction and arrest due to failure to testify and produce documents, congressional investigatory powers were validated. This persists into present-day investigations, including that of the former Trump administration, as Congress uses power more expansively without legal repercussions.
During the creation of the Constitution, the founders intended for the legislative branch to hold the most power as they feared an all-powerful president. James Madison encouraged the checking of branches in Federalist 51 by saying he supported, quote, a government which is to be administered by men over men, unquote. Ironically, the Constitution does not say anything specifically about oversight and investigation. Rather, it is implied in the phrase all legislative powers possessed by Congress.
It was assumed that Congress would be able to overlook other branches and investigate if they deemed it necessary. The main difference between oversight and the power to investigate is that oversight is a more broad term. It refers to the checks and balances system and how the legislative branch has the implied power to oversee the executive branch and monitor their actions. Congressional oversight is ongoing as they are constantly checking the power of the executive in their activities.
On the other hand, the power to investigate is another way the legislative branch may check the executive branch. Both oversight and investigatory power are essential to the integrity of this nation's government. However, oversight is more important as it is ongoing and vital to the system of checks and balances. Congress constantly is creating special committees for specific agencies and making sure that there is nothing suspicious occurring.
Oversight can encompass anything from getting reports from presidents, giving advice and consent for presidential nominations and treaties, to impeachment proceedings and budgeting. Congressional oversight at its best is using its power to hold the federal government accountable, but this role has been damaged extensively by the Trump administration. The Trump administration at one point claimed they were fighting all subpoenas, and because of this, the executive branch was largely unchecked.
One major instance of the former executive not complying with congressional oversight was the administration's refusal to turn the president's tax returns despite the law requiring compliance. Refusing subpoenas is nothing new to the executive office, as President Nixon refused subpoenas to release incriminating tapes surrounding Watergate due to his claims of executive privilege and national security. These actions set a dangerous precedent as it limits Congress's powers of checks and balances and can create an all-powerful executive.
In President Nixon's case, he was eventually forced to turn over the tapes, and a new congressional committee was established, including the Select Committee on Presidential Campaign Activities. Congressional oversight played a major role in the United States removal of troops in Vietnam after hearings were televised at the Senate Foreign Relations Committee regarding the Pentagon Papers. Throughout American history, administrations have tested the powers of congressional oversight and proven it is of the utmost importance this congressional duty is honored, as it can uncover fatal flaws within our system of government and those who lead it. We are now ready for your questions.
Thank you so much for that. In your opening statement, you said that you believed that Congress's investigatory powers have been, correct me if I'm wrong in this, overall ineffective at actually enacting any sort of meaningful change. Is that correct to what you said? Is that accurate? In your opinion, how would you measure the success or the effectiveness of an investigation? Is the measure of success that there is some sort of laws passed as a revelation, as because of the revelations of the investigation, or is it okay if an investigation really doesn't come up with anything meaningful? What outcomes are we looking for, and how do you measure that?
With investigations, I would say we're just really trying our best to hold the executive branch accountable, and so it kind of determines on what they are investigating. I think, holding investigations often to check waste and balance and all of that is important, and in some cases it does require law to kind of better our system of government, but that's not always the case.
You gave the example of a negative effect on the investigatory powers when President Trump refused to turn over his tax records. And you talked about Watergate, I guess, as an example of the beneficial use of the investigatory powers of the legislative body. And I'm wondering, in Watergate, a great deal was known prior to the legislative hearings. The Washington Post had been giving details, factual details of what was occurring for quite some time before those hearings. What do you understand the basis was for a subpoena for President Trump's tax records? Was it a fishing expedition, as his supporters claimed, or was it related to some responsibility of Congress to get those records?
I saw it as a responsibility of Congress. Over the past 30 years, it's kind of become a responsibility of the executive to turn over those tax returns for the people. I think the more information that you can give to the people, the more clarity and transparency that the executive can is important. And so that's why Congress did request those. And that was just one of the subpoenas the administration refused, but they did quote at one time that they were going to refuse to comply with all subpoenas.
So let me ask you this. Should the, I'm thinking that I think President Hoover is widely considered to have become a candidate for president and to win the presidency because of his hearings that were held about World War I procurement. And I think President Truman came to national notice for the same reason in World War II. It's an inherent, these are political animals. This is an inherently political. So the question is, should the motivation, should sort of naked partisanship or naked ambition, does that matter constitutionally from the right of these committees to conduct these investigations? How would you handle that? How would you address that?
Could you rephrase that question, please?
Yeah, to what extent should the motivation of a particular senator or congressman affect the right of the committees to conduct their investigation? Say that the effort to get President Trump's tax returns was solely because the Democrats were trying to get something to embarrass him. As a constitutional matter, does that change Congress's right to conduct the investigation?
I think one of the, or here, Amita, were you gonna go? Okay, I think one of the things that the founding fathers didn't foresee in the way today is the extreme partisanship, and that's definitely something that we see a lot of investigatory and oversight, used to kind of further that. I definitely think, trying to set a certain narrative or, being partisan for reasons of investigatory, it's definitely damaging, and I think it does lessen their right given by the Constitution, but I still think that it's important to exercise those oversight powers.
I do also believe to some extent it is a political rather than purely legal standpoint. So partisanship will always play a role when you are conducting investigations, which is why there are multiple committees that go through the process where you have to have multiple bodies that are conducting these investigations. But with the extreme partisanship that we see today, this has obviously changed in the past 100 or so years, especially. So that will play a vital role, even if it wasn't intended with the Constitution.
Adding on to what they said, just in an ideal world, the partisanship would not play a huge role into it, but because today we see there's a big difference between the Republicans and Democrats where they can't compromise they basically just will be very polar opposite.
Do you have any suggestions for how the process might be reformed or improved given the extreme partisanship that we're living through now and have been for the past 10 or more years?
Based on what Nick said in the past, obviously compromise has been deemed somewhat of a dirty word in today's political climate, but focusing more on bipartisanship, both in committee and just in conducting investigations and hearing, working together to create compromise, to create a solid basis of understanding to conduct investigations would be the most important moving forward.
In your opening statement, you said that the investigatory power is implied. So if the investigatory power is not explicitly stated anywhere in the Constitution, can you give a defense, a constitutional defense for the fact that Congress even has that power, if it's implied?
Yeah, implied powers are a really important part of our Constitution because it's like the Constitution gives us, they say we can make laws, but they don't say what we can make laws about. So even that's an implied power. And so these implied powers aren't not explicitly stated in our Constitution. And so with that power, that's how we know that Congress should be exercising their right to oversee the government and check the executive branch in this way.
And when the framers created the Constitution, all of them knew that the power to investigate and oversight was going to be involved because that was what Britain, they had that power in their government, and they just didn't really see it necessary to write it down in the Constitution, but they all agreed that it was going to be used.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, Anthony, I thought you want to go ahead?
Go ahead, Andrew.
Okay. So I guess what would you say is just in the time we have, the best and the worst examples of Congress's use of the oversight or investigatory power?
I would say the worst would be McCarthyism, which robbed a lot of people of their jobs and livelihoods. And I think some of the best was definitely in the Nixon case.
Okay, Amita or Nick?
One of the examples of the worst would be the Hollywood 10 case, where in 1947, Congress was very concerned that there were several people in Hollywood who were supportive of communism. And because of this, several people lost their jobs and their careers were ruined, even though nothing was ever really nothing was confirmed.
Okay.
That's time.
Okay, just quickly, Amita, if you have another example you want to give, we'll give you a chance to do that if you can do it briefly.
Yeah, one of the worst examples I have to agree would be the Unactivities Committee that truly was not a great example of investigatory power usage. And I would have to agree with Emma. Watergate scandal was probably one of the best uses.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for being here today. I really, really appreciated your opening statements. It really kind of walked us through the history. I had heard about the Teapot Dome scandal. You know, in doing a little bit of my preliminary research, I looked at some of these examples, but I didn't even really get to look into what happened there until right now. So I'm glad you guys got to inform me about that one a little bit more for the rest of the day. I really appreciated your sort of the way that you painted a picture of how the powers have been used. And I wish I would have gotten more in the follow-up about your opinions on the effective use. When we asked about like, okay, how do you measure the successfulness or effectiveness of the investigations? It was kind of vague. We want to check for waste. It doesn't always have to have a new law. I would like to see some sort of measure of this is how the investigation powers should be used. Here's a good example. Here's a bad example. And not just here's an example, but here's why this is a good example. And I think we kind of got there towards the end, with Andrew's last question. But that was sort of a core issue here that I should be addressed. And I felt like it took us a lot to dig that out. And you guys are all very well spoken. You had a lot of wonderful examples and wonderful thoughts. But my constructive feedback here is that the core issue of the question, I don't feel like we ever got a strong sense of where you fell on the spectrum of like how these powers should be used.
Building on what Anthony said, I certainly agree that you're articulate. Your initial presentation was comprehensive in dealing with the question regarding investigation and oversight. But for example, when you with the answer that no, it doesn't have to come out with a law, that doesn't measure the success of the investigation. You might then give us an example of one investigatory hearing that you feel was beneficial for the country or for legislators to learn knowledge that didn't necessarily result in the enactment of new legislation, that sort of thing. So maybe just a little stronger statement of examples like that and why you advocate a certain position or not. But this is complex stuff, and I mentioned yesterday I tell my friends who are lawyers what these questions are, and they look at me like I'm crazy that what, people are going to discuss this and they have information to contribute, and you did discuss it and you did have information to contribute. So kudos to you. Thank you very much.
I agree. I was real struck by your planned college majors. We've got two political scientists, one of whom's going to wag the dog, I guess, and one of whom's going to become maybe the next Paul Krugman. Though I will say, Amita, I was a political science major, and I managed to make it out of college without ever being required to take a course in statistics. So that's about as qualitative as it comes. And Nick, with engineering, I think you're most likely to be the one to sort of be a billionaire, because I think that's sort of where that going. But I would have liked to see a little bit more participation. I had the sense that Nick and Amita, you had, sort of when we managed to draw you out, you had a lot to contribute. And this is in no way to sort of disparage Emma at all. You were fantastic. I don't know if it's sometimes, there's more of, some people sort of need a beat before they, they answer the question. And so I think the thing is, participation is one of the things that we're required to grade you on. And I would have liked to have seen it a little more evenly distributed, which admittedly can be difficult with Zoom. So I don't want to sort of be too critical about that. I loved your discussion of the history. I mean, Teapot Dome, the Hollywood 10. You guys really, this is a great question in terms of the history. It's so informed by history, and it's so inextricably linked to political ambition. I mean, there are just so many people throughout the history of this country have become, we know of them today by virtue of their involvement in exactly these kinds of investigations and the like. So it's not a surprise that they're sort of trying to elbow each other out of the way in order to get in front of the camera. They, you know, the joke about the most dangerous place in Washington is between a politician and a camera, you know. So anyway, on that note, thank you. Really, really, really good job, and congratulations to your teachers and certainly to your parents.
Thank you, and good luck in college next year.